The video starts with a question that immediately hits the viewer without giving any clear answer. What if one of the most disturbing stories circulating about Hollywood is not completely fake, but also not fully true? Suddenly, the name Katt Williams appears connected to a highly controversial figure like Ali Carter, and this is where confusion begins. People are usually trained to either fully believe something or completely reject it, but this story forces you to stay in the gray area. The claims being made are extreme enough to feel unbelievable, yet detailed enough to make some viewers pause and think, what if there is a fraction of truth here? That exact tension is what holds attention, because the video doesn't give answers, it creates doubt that pushes you to keep watching. But the deeper you go, the less clear everything becomes, not the other way around. The story takes a strange turn when Ali Carter is introduced as someone claiming to have lived inside a hidden system full of dark secrets. According to her account, she wasn't just an observer, but someone who experienced a long and disturbing reality behind closed doors. She describes secret locations, powerful individuals, and a structure far bigger than what most people can imagine. But here is the first major problem. There is no clear, verifiable evidence supporting her claims. Because of that, when her story first surfaced, it was quickly dismissed and labeled as exaggeration or fiction. People naturally reject ideas that completely shatter the reality they're used to, especially when celebrities are involved. However, Ali never backed down. She continued repeating the same claims without changing her narrative. That consistency is what made some people start questioning again. Not because the story became proven, but because persistence creates curiosity. Still, with every new claim, the gap between belief and doubt only grew wider, and that is where the tension begins. The story wasn't new, but it suddenly exploded again when Katt Williams entered the conversation. His statements reignited the entire debate, especially because he's known for speaking openly about controversial topics without hesitation. Once people started connecting his comments with Ali's claims, the situation shifted. It was no longer seen as a single individual story. It became a wider discussion spreading across the internet. Social media did what it always does: amplify, repeat, and turn speculation into something that feels important just because it is constantly mentioned. And that repetition creates a dangerous illusion of credibility. The more something is shared, the more people assume there must be truth behind it. But in reality, frequency is not evidence. As the story kept circulating, it slowly moved out of its original context and became a mixture of fact, speculation, and interpretation. Yet the most powerful element was not the story itself, it was the names being attached to it. This is where curiosity turns into shock. Suddenly, massive names like Beyoncé and Denzel Washington get loosely connected to the claims being discussed. This is exactly what causes stories like this to spread rapidly, because people are naturally drawn to anything that challenges their perception of well-known figures. However, the mention of a name is not proof of involvement. The internet rarely cares about that distinction. It only cares about impact, and the bigger the name, the faster the content spreads. This is where most viewers fall into a trap, confusing mention with confirmation. A name appearing in a narrative does not validate the claim, but in the world of viral content, that difference often gets lost. Over time, the story stops being a discussion and turns into a mixture of assumptions and interpretations, making it harder to separate reality from exaggeration. But the real question is not who was mentioned, it's why people are willing to believe it so easily. The answer lies in what has already happened in the past. Cases like Jeffrey Epstein destroyed a lot of public trust in powerful institutions and celebrities. When real scandals of that scale are exposed, it becomes easier for people to believe that other hidden things might also exist. The mind starts connecting unrelated dots because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. This is where conspiracy thinking grows, not always because it is correct, but because it fills the gaps left by missing transparency. Over time, people stop evaluating each claim individually and instead judge everything through the lens of suspicion. That does not mean everything is false, but it also does not mean everything is true. The problem is that most viewers are not looking for balance. They're looking for a story that satisfies curiosity, and the darker the story sounds, the more attention it gets. But this is where things become dangerous, because the line between truth and imagination starts to disappear completely. At this point, the issue is no longer just the story itself, but how it's being presented. Content creators understand that shock drives engagement, so every detail gets amplified, whether it is confirmed or not. Powerful wording, dramatic framing, and constant repetition are used to keep viewers watching. But the reality is that many of these videos aren't built to inform. They're built to retain attention. This creates a cycle where viewers click out of curiosity and creators escalate claims to maintain interest. The result is a distorted version of reality where speculation and fact blend together. And over time, this affects how audiences process information, making it harder to distinguish between credible reporting and emotionally driven storytelling. And once that line is blurred, even real events start to feel questionable. And that is where the real problem begins. In the middle of all this noise, one key point gets ignored. Not everything is false, but not everything is true either. There is a major difference between verified scandals and unverified claims, yet the internet tends to treat them the same way. This creates confusion that can actually harm real victims and real cases, because everything becomes part of the same chaotic narrative. When facts and speculation are constantly mixed, truth gets buried under noise. Worse, some individuals might even exploit this confusion to spread misinformation more effectively. In the end, the viewer becomes the one paying the price, struggling to separate reality from distortion. This isn't entirely their fault, but rather the result of an information environment that prioritizes speed and virality over accuracy. And that leads to the final question. After everything that has been discussed, there is still no clear answer, and that is the point. The story isn't really about proving anything, but about forcing a question. Are we actually searching for truth, or just consuming whatever feels the most shocking and satisfying? When a famous name gets attached to a serious claim, do we stop and analyze, or do we instantly accept or reject it without thinking deeper? And when a story sounds impossible, do we dismiss it completely, or do we try to understand why it even exists in the first place? The truth may exist somewhere in between, but reaching it requires more than passive viewing. It requires skepticism, patience, and critical thinking. Because in a world full of information, the most dangerous thing is not outright lies, it's half-truths that feel believable enough to spread.